Do you think Stranger Things is the most accurate 1980s show ever made? It feels right, it sounds right, but a lot of it isn't. Behind the bikes and the nostalgia, there are details that simply don't belong in the 80s. Details only people who lived through that decade would notice. Let's talk about what Stranger Things actually got wrong. First, sensitive subjects. Yeah, I'm starting with this because I pull no punches. The show acknowledges that the 80s weren't kind to gay people, but then softens the reality. There's a long coming out scene where everyone is surprisingly supportive and emotionally mature. That's touching, but unrealistic. The 80s were deep in the AIDS crisis, and acceptance, especially in a small town like Hawkins, was not common, gentle, or safe. Then there are futuristic cars. Yeah, futuristic. Not DeLoreans, though. Barb's car simply didn't exist in the year the show is set. It's a small detail, but it's a clear time traveler moment hiding in plain sight. She drove a 1988 VW Rabbit Cabriolet when it was 1983 in the show. A 72 VW Super Beetle would have been period perfect. Ask me how I know. It was my first car. Even the periodic table slips up. Some elements shown in the series hadn't been officially discovered or named yet. You probably didn't notice, but chemistry nerds absolutely did. The element was seaborgium. What is that, you ask? I have no clue. My nerd meter doesn't go that high. But anywho, it wasn't named that until the 90s. And look, if I tried pronouncing it what it was called in the 80s, 30 takes later and I'd still be working on this video. Moving on, one of the biggest fan debates, Master of Puppets. Eddie's legendary Metallica scene is unforgettable. Problem is, when Eddie plays Master of Puppets, the album had just come out. So realistically, he wouldn't have known the notes to play on the guitar. Hell, most kids would still be listening to Ride the Lightning, which, let's be honest, is a better album. No, really. Creeping Death is the greatest thrash metal song of all time. You can take that to the bank. And yes, it's better than Rain in Blood by Slayer. Then we get to the super walkie-talkies. The kids communicate across absurd distances with crystal clear audio. In reality, 80s walkie-talkies struggled to reach the end of the street, especially my street. It was long. Let alone forests, buildings, and secret government labs underground. I mean, sure, it's better than 2 soup cans and a string, but not by much. And I know, I used both. The tech problems don't stop there. Susie is shown using HTML on an old computer at that. HTML didn't exist yet. Not only that, but owning a home computer in the early 80s was rare, expensive, and usually limited to very basic functions. Susie wasn't just ahead of her time, she was in the wrong decade. Then there's smoking. Oh, the good old smoking days, right? Early on, Joy smokes constantly, which is accurate. But later seasons treat smoking as a clear moral failing, mostly reserved for villains like Billy. Boy, did he look cool though. That's modern thinking in the 80s. Everyone smoked back then. Heroes, parents, teachers, doctors. It was edgy. It was normal. And it happened in restaurants, at work, on buses, sometimes on airplanes. Yeah, seriously. The language is another giveaway. Kids casually throw around terms like trauma, PTSD, and double standards. Those concepts existed, but teenagers absolutely did not talk like that in the 80s. Hell, most adults didn't use them either, and only doctors knew what they meant. The dialogue often sounded emotionally modern in a retro costume. Oh, and the fashion. Fashion misses a beat too, specifically shoulder pads and jelly shoes. You know, the jelly shoes, the kind you took off at the end of the day and the pattern of the shoe was stamped into your feet with dirt lining the pattern? And not to mention the shoulder pads. They were everywhere from the late 70s onward, yet nearly non-existent in the show. An entire decade of the best fashion ever erased. The show also tones down racism and sexism. Yes, it's present, but heavily diluted. In reality, casual racism and sexism were baked into everyday conversations. Not villains, not extremists, regular people. White people. The show cleans it up to make it easier to watch. If Max would have kissed Lucas in the real 1980s, Max would have been pulled out of public school and sent to a private religious school to remove her demons. Yeah, really. Then there's the mall. Malls were huge in the 80s, but Hawkins is supposed to be a tiny, ignored Midwestern town. Somehow, it gets a massive state-of-the-art shopping complex. You kind of have to pick one or the other, small town or big town with a mall. Not both. Another issue, the flashlights are another quiet cheat. They behave like modern LED lights, cutting through the darkness with surgical precision. Yeah, real 80s flashlights barely lit up the floor in front of you. And even Dungeons & Dragons isn't safe. The kids reference monsters, rules, and concepts that didn't even exist in versions available at the time. And playing Dungeons & Dragons back then, they usually came with way more bullying than the show ever shows. Back then, rolling a d20 didn't give you XP, it gave you wedgies. And finally, KFC. Steve says he loves KFC just like the rest of us, except it wasn't called KFC yet. In the 80s, it was still Kentucky Fried Chicken. The rebrand didn't happen until the 90s. With all that said, none of this ruins the show. Not killing off some of the regular cast does. Oops, did I say that out loud? Stranger Things isn't a documentary, it's a love letter. Love letter? But it's a love letter written with modern eyes, modern values, and modern shortcuts. It captures the feeling of the 80s perfectly, even if the details don't always. Don't always what? Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.